Hello, and welcome to Region Locked. Ace Attorney is a series best known in the West for its Nintendo DS releases. However, the franchise spans many titles over several consoles, so it's unsurprising that some Ace Attorney games never made it to the West. Today, we'll be exploring one of those titles, DYKG Saiban Naruhodo Runosuke Noboken, which means Great Turnabout Trial, the adventure of Runosuke Naruhodo. Before we discuss why this 3DS entry never came to the West, let's take a look at the game itself. The title plays in the same style to those that came before it. It has courtroom-style arguments where the player must present evidence and find flaws in witness statements, as well as investigative segments to gather evidence to be used in court. Released in 2015, the game makes use of the same 3D graphics found in Ace Attorney Dual Destinies, but also adds cross-examination with multiple witnesses. This additional feature was previously showcased in Professor Layton vs Phoenix Wright Ace Attorney. Unlike previous entries in Ace Attorney, this game takes place towards the end of the 19th century. In Japan, this is known as the Meiji period, or in Britain, the Victorian era. The story follows Runosuke Naruhodo, an ancestor of Phoenix Wright, as he works his way to becoming a fully fledged defense attorney. After being put on trial for the murder of his Japanese university teacher Dr. John Watson, Runosuke manages to prove that the true culprit is an English exchange student. This student is Giselle Brett, who was studying under Watson at the time. With her motive still unclear, Brett is released back to England. After the trial, Runosuke travels to England as a stowaway. He's accompanied by his assistant, Susato Mikotoba, and Runosuke's representative during the trial, Asogi. While in England, Runosuke becomes familiar with the world-renowned detective Sherlock Holmes, and they work to solve several cases together. The game was directed by Shu Takumi, who started work on the game after finishing Professor Layton vs Phoenix Wright. Takumi wanted to try an idea he'd thought of over a decade earlier, where the player has to constantly correct a detective. The investigator would continue to make incorrect deductions, and the player would have to steer them towards the truth. Takumi had also wanted to create a Sherlock Holmes game for some time, and decided to use Holmes from the game's inception. Sherlock was used as a way to introduce new gameplay concepts involving deduction, but he was also used to separate the game from the rest of the core series by forcing a change in time period. Takumi found it difficult to work with the era he had imposed upon himself. He had to create dialogue that wasn't too modern, but also not particularly old-fashioned. The lawyer profession was a new career path in Japan in this period too, and at the same time, Japan was starting to assimilate more Western culture and ideals. Despite featuring a popular Western character, the game was never translated and brought to the West. There are several possible reasons for this, but all we've heard from Capcom's Motohide Ishiro, the game's producer, is as follows. Unfortunately, there's a number of circumstances. We absolutely do want to bring it to the West, but unfortunately, due to these circumstances right now, I'm really sorry. Nowadays on the internet, lots of fans are directly asking us where's DYKG Saiban? On live streams, even in the Japanese ones, people from the West will write in and ask where it is. Every time we say, we're sorry. Certain circumstances are getting in the way. The circumstances have yet to be made public, but there are two reasons that seem most likely. The first reason is that the game might feature too much historical racism that would be hard to censor if localized. The second reason is that Capcom may fear legal action from the estate of Conan Doyle. Throughout the game, many characters are portrayed as being casually racist towards the Japanese, as this would have been the case during the game's time period. Characters make racist claims, such as stating that all Japanese people look the same, or that Ryu is a yellow devil, and that he is using Oriental black magic. It's possible that Capcom are more wary about the sensibilities of Western gamers picking up the title and thinking that the game's writers, or by extension Capcom itself, have an issue with the Japanese. In Japan, racist comments like these aren't perceived as harshly due to the country being primarily ethnically homogenous. In regards to the Conan Doyle estate, this is where it gets a bit more tricky. Sherlock Holmes was the intellectual property of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, the character's original creator. After he passed away, all of the rights to Sherlock Holmes were passed on to his family, family. While the character of Holmes is public domain in many countries, the estate do not believe the character of Sherlock Holmes is public domain in the United States. Law states that any work published in the US before 1923 is public domain, but the estate argued against this. They argued that, due to the fact that while almost all of Sir Doyle's work was published prior to 1923, a set of 10 stories were published after that year. The estate believed that because those 10 books are still under copyright, the entire character of Sherlock Holmes should remain under copyright as well. However, this is not how public domain laws work, and the American District Court and Appeals Court explained how copyright works to the estate in 2013. This explanation didn't stop the estate from attempting to sue several productions that use the Holmes brand, however. It's possible that, due to the track record of the Conan Doyle estate, Capcom is reluctant to include Holmes' likeness in any works published in the United States. And since Holmes is such an integral part of the story and setting, removing him isn't a viable option.
Newt Newt, and welcome to Region Locked. It isn't rare to see a children's series take hold internationally, particularly if language isn't a major factor. This is why series like Mr. Bean, a British show, can be appreciated regardless of whether you speak English or not. With the stop-motion series Pingu, all characters speak the made-up language of Pinguish. Initially created for a Swiss audience by Ottmar Gutmann, the show was picked up by the BBC shortly after production began. Pingu's popularity became strong worldwide, particularly in Japan. So much so that there's actually a Japanese-produced CGI Pingu series called Pingu in the City. Pingu's popularity in the region spawned many exclusive products and ventures, including a few video games produced by leading AAA developers. And today, we'll be looking at 3 of them. Pingu's first dip into the video game market came in 1993 on the Game Boy, with the release of the Japanese exclusive Pingu, the most cheerful penguin in the world. Being one of the first games developed by Tom Create, the title was published by BI, a subsidiary of Bandai. The game lets the player live out Pingu's daily life. In a similar fashion to the television show, each level has Pingu perform different activities, with 4 levels in total. In level 1, having eaten all of the 1 fish in the igloo, Pingu is instructed to go out and catch 10 more. Good parenting. To do so, the player attaches bait to the line and lowers it down. Once a fish is hooked, they must then hit the A button as quickly as possible to bring the fish up to the surface. In level 2, Pingu takes his younger sister Pinga out. But as soon as he turns his back, she becomes stranded on a floating block of ice. Pingu must then jump between moving platforms to reach his sister. Level 3 sees Pingu accidentally breaking a vase. In an attempt to replace it, he goes to the shop, which has only a single vase for sale. The shopkeeper asks for a fish in return. Forgetting his fishing abilities from level 1, Pingu must score 3 points against each member of an ice hockey team 1 by 1 in order to win the fish. For level 4, we see Pingu bored and seeking attention from his mother. Busy with Pinga, she tells him to go out and find something else to do. Whilst wandering around, Pingu comes across some other penguins having a snowball fight. Pingu must then defeat them in 3 increasingly difficult rounds to win the game. Additional minigames can be unlocked by exploring the many igloos around Pingu's home, such as a sliding image puzzle or a simple clone of Puyo Puyo. A number of Easter eggs are also hidden in the title through the game's password screen. The password Pingu Snowman Dad Mum reveals a looping animation of Pingu dancing. Pingu Robbie Pinga and Snowman displays an image of Pingu and Pinga, and entering Pingu Dad Mum Pinga will grant the player access to a sound test menu. Exciting stuff. The second Japanese exclusive Pingu game is Fun Fun Pingu Welcome to Antarctica, developed by C-Lab and published by Sony Music Entertainment for the original PlayStation. Similar to his first outing on the Game Boy, this release once again sees Pingu exploring his home and playing through various minigames. More complex than earlier Pingu releases, the player is given control over how they interact with scenery between each minigame. Pingu can run, speak with other characters, and even has dedicated buttons for newting both forwards and above. The main focus of the game is to complete requests for people around Pingu's home while listening to repeating 15-second samples of music. Each chapter focuses on different problems that must be solved. Usually, these involve Pingu traveling to a location, picking up an item, and using that item to progress through the game. To complete each level, the player must also beat a minigame relating to the objective. After each minigame is unlocked, it can then be replayed from the game's main menu. The team that worked on the Pingu show, Tighe Group, assisted with the creation of Pingu's first 3D adventure. This would also be the only time that a character would be introduced in a Pingu game, Pop-Off, though he doesn't make any appearance outside of this title. The next Japanese exclusive Pingu game we'll be talking about was developed and published by Square Enix, Pingu's Wonderful Carnival, which released on the Nintendo DS in 2008. Once again, the game is formed of several minigames starring Pingu and his family. By exploring the world with the game's touchscreen, Pingu will meet a number of characters who host various minigames. As we've seen from the earlier Pingu releases, these games range from simplistic fishing, cleaning the family home while preventing Pingu from causing more mess, and Cooking Mama-style cooking games. By completing a range of objectives, the player is rewarded with items and money which can be spent on customization options such as hats. These three games never saw a release outside of Japan. While no specifics can be given as to why this is, complications with games following international franchises are, as we often say, nothing new. It's clear that the team behind Pingu saw promise in the Japanese region. Not only did the franchise have 3 exclusive games in Japan, but the region also had a series of PlayStation gamepads designed for children's hands with smaller grips, and various figures of characters on top of them. The 2008 release of Pingu on the Nintendo DS came after Square Enix announced plans to expand its operations. They created the Pure Dreams brand, focusing on character franchises. Pingu was the first in their launch lineup for this project, followed by a game based on Snoopy. These seem to be the only 2 games created for Pure Dreams, so it's likely the venture wasn't as fruitful as Square Enix had hoped, and doubt was cast upon how successful these titles would perform overseas. From Software are a company best known for their Soulborn series, games with a heavy emphasis on a dark world full of rich lore, as well as a high difficulty level. The company has published games like these for a long time, creating Kingsfield and Echo Knight on the PlayStation, as well as Shadow Tower. While those associated in the Soulborn series weren't necessarily involved in these earlier games, similarities can be drawn between them, with the company's style holding strong across their catalogue. While English players were able to play the original Shadow Tower and Echo Knight, their sequels never saw release outside of Japan. So today we'll be looking at both, starting with Echo Knight 2 for the original PlayStation. Echo Knight 2 was released in 1999, 1 year after the first iteration in the series. Like many From Software games, stories are given by inference rather than clear exposition. In the original Echo Knight, Richard Osmond was searching for his father, discovering an artifact on his journey known as the Red Stone. This stone had magical abilities, granting immense power to those who attached the stone to a knife and kill. Richard also became capable of projecting his consciousness into the ghosts around him, giving him a glimpse into the past. While Echo Knight 2 is a sequel to the original game, Richard never acknowledges the events or story from the first release. It's likely the sequel was created as a way to revisit the concepts and themes of the first game and honing its original ideas, as opposed to continuing the story. The story of Echo Knight 2 follows the Clancy family. Jessica Clancy has fallen deathly ill, leading her husband and the game's main antagonist, Albert Clancy, to follow an ancient ritual in order to save her life. He is the heir to his family estate, who were English nobility that settled in America. He has since inherited their assets. They have been researching the ruins on their estate and have an artifact in their possession called the Soul Stone. It does almost the same thing as the Red Stone from the original game, but it isn't the Red Stone, it's the Soul Stone. Rather than give power, the Soul Stone is charged and starts to glow when enough people are killed. This allows its wielder to grant immortality to somebody if they have a twin, by sacrificing the other twin with the Soul Stone. At the start, Albert has killed almost everyone on his estate in order to charge the stone. He intends to kill Christina Collins, Richard Osmond's girlfriend, and Jessica Clancy's twin sister. A red-headed woman seems to be working with Albert, who several generations ago was sick like Jessica. Her twin performed the Soulstone ritual and cured her, making her immortal, not being able to die from age or injury. She approached Albert after seeing Jessica's situation in order to assist him with the Soulstone. The player takes on the role of Richard Osmond as he tries to find his girlfriend who has been missing for 3 months. She was last seen around the library of the college in which she works. Police have had no luck in the situation since her disappearance, and so Richard decides to get involved, setting out for the college. Finding a book containing a photograph of Jessica Clancy, his girlfriend's twin, leads him to believe that she may have gone to the Clancy estate, where his investigation begins. Similar to the original Echo Knight in many ways, the game is a first-person adventure game with no weapons. The player must solve the mysteries surrounding the events unfolding around them by exploring the Clancy residence and finding clues. The player can pick up objects and inspect them. Richard sees ghosts around the mansion, and his spirit is capable of traveling through time, showing him the memories of the dead. In these memories, he is able to interact with the environment around him physically and can transport objects through time. Though sometimes he will have physical form, and sometimes he will simply be there to observe the events unfolding. Richard helps the spirits of the manor pass on by solving their problems. While some ghosts are friendly, some aren't, and they will attack the player. The only defense against ghosts is lights. The player must escape danger by turning a room's lights on. Ultimately, the player must collect astral pieces by helping spirits and progress to one of 4 different endings. The game has several unused items as found by users of the cutting room floor. 3 items can be found in the game's data which serve no function, and without names, or simply botsu, meaning unused. These are what appears to be a ring, a talisman on a string, and a pair of glasses. There are also 2 unused rooms. One which has a name linking it to the campus library, featuring a man laying on the ground wielding a knife, with a woman approaching him. The other has names linking it to the past, or prior to the events of the game, suggesting it were to be a part of an unused prologue. The room is fully fleshed out, though lacks collision detection. When entering this room, the line November 1965 and Anchor City, America are displayed, with a line reading, "It's almost time." Another remnant is an unused intro to the game, which differs in how the player arrives at the game's primary location, the Clancy Mansion. These unused locations, as well as the changed introductory cutscene, reveals that how the game's opening would unfold had changed during production. Originally, Christina was a college graduate who went missing on the day of her graduation. There are several Easter eggs throughout the game too, such as the page of the old book in the introductions library revealing the setup for the first Echo Knight. There's also another page in the game's data which is never shown, showing a phrase in reverse. It reads, "That is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. Hurrah for HPL." This line is an extract from the Necronomicon written by H.P. Lovecraft, followed by "Hurrah for HPL." A newspaper in the game is also called Sarnath Voice, a reference to a story by Lovecraft entitled The Doom That Came to Sarnath. There are also many more small pieces in the data that go completely unused, from dialogue lines to images. With regards to why Echo Knight 2 never saw a release in the West, it can be assumed that From Software or Agetec treated the release of the first Echo Knight as a way of testing how the game would be received. The original Echo Knight was published in North America on August 30th, 1999, less than a full month after Echo Knight 2 released in Japan. As the first Echo Knight was met with a generally mixed reception in the West, it would have likely been an unwise financial decision to release the sequel as well. The game features extensive voice acting, and these lines would have probably required redubbing for approval overseas, increasing localization costs. In 2015, a fan translation was created by Gemini and Tom from Devil Hackers. In 2008, the two decided to work on translating the game, making quick progress but ultimately stopping after a few months. 7 years later, they gave it another stab and had finished translation in a window of around 3 weeks, implementing their translation and roughly 10 days of revisions and tests. The duo gave the game the subtitle of The Lord of Nightmares, rather than directly translating the game's Japanese title, which would be more in the line of Master of Slumber. This was after finding the phrase Lord of Nightmare on one of the game's items, and simply adding an S to it. They had hoped to redub the game into English as well, but with so many characters involved in the game's events, this was not feasible. Shadow Tower Abyss was released for the PlayStation 2 in late 2003, exclusively to Japanese audiences. Being the sequel to a game which came 4 years prior, the game sees the return of the Citadel locale, as well as several characters. The game's story involves the player, an explorer, who is in search of a magical spear which was said to have given great powers to the now-deceased ruler of the kingdom, bringing with it an age of unparalleled prosperity and peace. While much of the kingdom is now covered in a large forest, the Citadel, an intimidatingly large tower, still remains. While in search of the Citadel, the explorer becomes trapped within, giving him only a single means of escape: to reach the top of the structure. Much of the game's world is shrouded in mystery, with many creatures providing sparsely given context to their existence, giving only small snippets of backstory. Shadow Tower Abyss plays similarly to the original Shadow Tower, albeit with some minor changes. The game is played from a first-person perspective while also making use of RPG mechanics. While the player doesn't level up from killing enemies in the traditional sense, they do gradually grow with each kill, slightly increasing their stats. It's also possible to bolster stats through finding and releasing souls. With melee weapons, the player can attack with a left or right swipe, a thrusting motion, or an overhead strike. The variety of weapons provide different strengths and weaknesses, with some weapons providing better damage with different types of attack. Stamina is displayed as orbs, showing the player how many attacks can be stored for quick successive hits, with some weapons allowing for more attacks in succession than others. Enemies can have specific body parts targeted, allowing for dismemberment and decapitation. The player is also able to make use of firearms, though without a reticule for precise aiming, and with a relatively limited supply of ammunition throughout the tower. The player can also find rings that grant the ability to cast magic. As with melee attacks, magic abilities have a limited number of uses in quick succession, as well as draining the player's MP. As the player progresses, they will find themselves with a wide variety of equipment, a major element to the game's survival mechanics. As the player has a limited weight capacity, they will find that they will need to dispose of items as to not become over-encumbered. While the player can drop items or sell them at a store, they are also capable of sacrificing equipment in order to regain a portion of their health and mana. Equipment will also begin to deteriorate over time through use, meaning that the player may need to consider how much equipment they keep with them in order to use some for restoration purposes, as well as swapping items out as they become damaged. The game's map takes place across several areas of the tower, with many having different appearances to one another. While the player is able to view statistics of how much they've explored each location at any time, there is no map with the exception of infrequent drawings on walls left by previous explorers, meaning the player must memorize their route or face becoming lost in the tower's corridors. Many of the game's NPCs can also be attacked and killed, regardless of whether they are considered antagonists or not. While Shadow Tower Abyss never received a release internationally, there was the intention to begin with. The game was announced in 2001 with a demonstration version of the title presented at the Tokyo Game Show in September of 2003. At the time, it was the only RPG that From Software was demonstrating, and the only game from their lineup which wouldn't ultimately go on to be released in the West. The game's English localization was being handled by Tighe, though it unfortunately never saw the light of day, as the project was cancelled during the localization stage. Mark Johnson, who worked as Tighe's producer at the time, made the announcement on the official Sony Computer Entertainment of America website that the game would not see an English release. Expanding on his statement, he posted to the company's forum explaining more about how the lack of release was a result of Sony's decision-making. Johnson claimed that Sony had expressed concerns over the game's projected sales outside of Japan, where it had ranked 14th overall for its first week of release, selling just under 13,000 units in its first 6 days. Sony was also worried that the quality of the game's visuals weren't able to compete with those seen in both rival RPGs and first-person genres. Johnson sorrowfully stated, "I've been in this industry now for over 10 years, and this was by far the hardest thing for me to accept, and I did everything possible to fight for its release. While it was an epic battle, it was unfortunately one that was lost. Petitioning to Sony would do nothing. Once they reject a title, it is final. Nothing whatsoever will ever change that." To add salt to the wound, Johnson claims that much of the localization had already been completed, with the only things that had not been finished being the game's packaging and instruction manual. Johnson clearly cared for this project, even offering to provide the translated US text to anybody interested if they simply emailed him and asked for it. While not receiving an official localization, the game did receive a fan translation several years later in 2011, created by Maud of Swoonlight and John Osborne on the Sword of Moonlight community forums.
Hello, and welcome to Region Locked. There have been plenty of crossover games of different series and brands. We've seen titles like Namco Cross Capcom take popular characters from different titles and throw them together into a tactical RPG. Or Konami Crazy Racers, taking characters and having them compete in a kart racer. Perhaps the most well-recognized crossover title is Super Smash Bros., bringing everybody's favorite Nintendo characters together, alongside a handful of extra fighters from other companies, and have them duke it out in a hectic fighting game. Well, today we're going to be looking at a game which tried to take this crossover fighting concept and create something branching out beyond the realms of just video games. Introducing an extensive range of heroes from different backgrounds, DreamMix TV World Fighters. DreamMix TV World Fighters was released in December of 2003 for the PlayStation 2 and GameCube. The title was developed by the small team Bitstep and published by Hudson. The game crosses over characters from not just Hudson and Konami, but also a variety of toy lines created by the company Takara. The game's story involves the television program World Fighters, which has been struggling to garner wide recognition from audiences, and the station which airs the show, DreamMix TV. The show's hosts, Mujo and Haruna, have been informed that it is up to them to increase the viewership of their show, otherwise they will see the program canceled. The duo come up with a cunning plan, pitting a variety of different superstars from across a wide range of realities against one another in physical combat. It's their hope that with such a wide range of fans from all of these different universes, their ratings are sure to skyrocket. DreamMix TV World Fighters allows up to 4-player competitive play, taking place on a 2D plane similar to Super Smash Bros., though differing a bit in how the player battles. Up to 4 fighters must simultaneously compete in combat in either free-for-all or team-based fights. At the beginning of a battle, coins are distributed across the stage, which must be collected before they disappear. These coins will determine how much health a character will have for their fight. Characters are not just able to perform basic melee attacks, but also utilize throws as well as a number of special moves. These of course vary between characters, and by hitting an opponent, coins will spill from the character, disappearing almost instantly, though particularly fast players may be able to retrieve these coins and regain some health of their own. Dodges can be performed while airborne, while guarding has to take place on the ground. Guarding will protect the player against most attacks, but are unable to block throws. The player must also grab ledges from their underside, or stage elements such as ropes, which the player is unable to stand on. Stages can often contain hazards as to be expected, which can also cause damage to the fighters. After a player has had their health completely depleted, they will be knocked to the ground, entering a state known as Super Pinch. In this state, their Kayara Dama, or soul, expels from their body, leaving them shrunken in size and unable to deal damage. If the player is able to retrieve their lost soul, they can return to a normal state and jump back into the fray, though they will of course have little health and be vulnerable to falling back into a super pinch. If any other fighter is able to collect the lost soul before the rightful owner, the soulless player will be knocked out of the fight. This doesn't mean that they simply sit out of battle, as they can still move around the arena and interfere with the remaining combatants. And the last player standing is deemed the victor. The game's single-player campaign, dubbed World Fighters, sees the player battle across a series of predetermined fights based on their chosen character. That is, before reaching a final boss battle against one of the game's presenters, Mujo. The game's scoring system is presented as the show's ratings, where ratings will fluctuate depending on the player's performance, with a rank based on their average battle rating at the end of the campaign. The game also features a versus mode allowing up to 4 players to compete against one another. Another extra single-player mode is called Caravan and has the player compete within a variety of score-based challenges. These have a wide variety of objectives, such as gathering as many health coins as possible within a certain allotted time, punching away bombs with timers before they reach 0 and explode, collecting 30 souls before the timer runs out, picking up a ball and throwing it at balloons to score points, and collecting coins by hanging to the underside of clouds. The game also features 17 playable fighters, with 6 of them having to be unlocked, These characters come from a variety of series from Hudson, Konami, and Takara. Initially, the player can choose from Hudson's White Bomber from the Bomberman franchise, Master Higgins, the protagonist of the Adventure Island series, Momotaro from the Japanese exclusive Momotaro Densetsu, and Yugo Ogami from Bloody Roar. For Konami, there's Power Pro Kun of the Power Pros baseball series, Simon Belmont from Castlevania, and Twin B. Takara's lineup includes Rika Kayama, a dress-up doll similar to Barbie introduced in Japan in 1967, M121 Mason from the Microman series of toys, Optimus Prime from the Transformers fame, and Tyson Granger from Beyblade. The fighters that can be unlocked are Bingogami from Momotaro Densetsu, Manjimaru Sengoku from the Far East of Eden RPG series, the Moai from Konami's Gradius, Solid Snake from the Metal Gear series, Takara's Asuka from Psy-Girls, and Megatron from Transformers. Each character also has 4 alternate costumes, such as being able to play as other characters from the Bomberman series, or Snake in his tuxedo, or his appearance as Pliskin in Metal Gear Solid 2, Sons of Liberty. Not only are the playable characters from a variety of series, but so are the game's wide range of stages, including a number of cameo appearances, such as Devastator from Transformers. A library mode is also supplied, which provides information on various characters, stages, and contains a music player. These entries in the library are unlocked after completing the World Fighters campaign, and stage profiles are provided by obtaining A ranks. DreamMix TV also has a lot of interesting technical trivia to share. For the character Optimus Prime, one of his abilities is to transform into a truck. And to pull this off, the developers would store the opposite transformation inside the character model. For example, when Optimus Prime is in Autobot form, you can see the decals for the truck inside of his body. And alternatively, when Optimus Prime is turned into a truck, you can find his head stored in the interior. There is also unusual techniques used in stages like Castlevania, where a large white sheet is stored behind the stage and is quickly moved into position every time there's supposed to be a lightning strike. These two details cannot be seen by normal means. It instead requires the manipulation of the game's camera, which, if that is something that piques your interest, be sure to check out my channel at the end of the video where I cover hundreds of games to discover details just like this. At the time of DreamMix TV World Fighters, Konami had an alliance with both Hudson and Takara, having a number of shares within the toy giant and going through the acquisition of Hudson to turn it into a subsidiary of Konami. It's very likely that the game was created as a way of boosting interest in all 3 of the company's brand interests, and as a result, improved brand recognition of companies that Konami held and invested interest in. Response from players was generally mixed, with balance being considered one of the game's major letdowns. In particular, many reviews and even members of staff know that Rika Kayama was considerably overpowered. DreamMix TV World Fighters was the first time that Snake would appear in a fighting game, a fair while before Super Smash Bros. Brawl. Interestingly, within the release of Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the series now encompasses the characters of both Simon Belmont and Bomberman, though Bomberman is relegated to an assist trophy. Master Higgins, known in Japan as Master Takahashi, is actually based on a real person, Toshiyuki Takahashi, who was even brought in to voice the character in DreamMix, as far as we know, for the first and last time. The original voice actors of Optimus Prime and Megatron also reprised their roles, Tessho Genda and Saizo Kato respectively. This was sadly the last performance for Saizo Kato, as he stepped down from the role in 2007 and passed in 2014. DreamMix TV World Fighters might have representation for series popular outside of Japan, but it also contains a significant number of characters which many outside of Japan will have absolutely no clue about. With the knowledge that the game's creation was a way of improving brand recognition for various companies of financial interest to Konami, those interests are mostly centered around a Japanese audience. While the game was released to middling reviews, it must have sold enough to warrant a re-release within Japan, being published again within the Hudson Best moniker of discounted games. If released outside of Japan, it would have most likely seen at least reasonable sales to recoup the cost of printing, translation, and marketing. However, there is one other cost involved. As the game sees the crossover of several licensed characters, including toy lines, the cost of licensing out those characters for multiple regions would have been significant. A coalition was made in the year 2000 after a request from Takara was made to Konami, and DreamMix was likely a way for the game publisher to assist with re-establishing financial stability for Takara. In 2005, 5 years after joining forces and 2 years after DreamMix was released, Konami shed their shares of Takara. Their reason for doing so was after 5 years of financial alliance. Konami claimed that Takara failed to deliver on promises. Takara intended to diversify their business plan while consolidating it to be easier for the company to handle. In the partnership's last financial year report, Takara reported a net loss of 15 billion yen, and Konami had a reduction in net profit by 3.3 billion yen. Konami sold off 20,104,000 shares, accounting for a 22.2% stake with Takara, or roughly 1/5. The sale was made to mobile game distributor Index Corporation, now known as Tighe Corporation, for a total of 11 billion yen, 6.1 billion more than Konami paid back in 2000. It's possible DreamMix receiving an international release would have resulted in more recognition overseas, as well as negating the reported poor performance of Takara to broaden its reach to an overseas market. Though, with the game's less than stellar reviews, it's possible that it could have caused more of a negative response from an international audience, rather than promoting the 3 companies involved at all. Ultimately, DreamMix TV World Fighters provided players with nothing new or groundbreaking, being seen mainly as a poor man's Smash Brothers, with lifted mechanics and an obscure cast of poorly optimized characters. Really? We're gonna end on that, dude? What? And it is this reporter's opinion that this game is awesome.
Hello, and welcome to the Three Master Games Patron Soul Market.
Yes, the best place to buy a
Chad Barnin or Alex Johansson.
buy Clefairy or Error 1355 and get
Every lap up free. Collect all the Patron Souls and fight your friends. It's the best way to get hold of Beats Barnes and Malcavio. Once you've knocked out the opponent, they will lose a patron. There is 3223232 to collect.
It's me, your boy Bear.
Awesome Jackie Duke, Cab 1111, and Guillermo Chavez are the rarest. Make sure that you call now and get a shiny Trevor Wooten, Robert Cox, or Jealous on a 7. Gotta Patreon them all. Oof.
Hello and welcome to Region Locked. Japan is well known for outlandish games and bizarre blends of genre, but even in the West, odd mixes have become more common. Adult Swim released Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am in 2007, combining the kart racer, golf and action genres to a fairly negative reception. But this game was not the first golf game to try combining the sport with alternative genres. Today we're looking at the Japanese exclusive Battle Golfer Yui. Battle Golfer Yui was released in 1991 for the Sega Genesis and was developed by Santos Limited, an obscure company with very few major releases under their belt prior to their merger with Sega's internal research and development team. The game follows the story of Yui Mizuhara, a high school student and golfer. Yui and her best friend, Ran Ryuzaki, are kidnapped by Professor G, the leader of Dark Hazard. This is because they are the ideal candidates for the cybernetic enhancements which will transform them into the battle-ready powerhouses known as Battle Golfers. He plans to use these Battle Golfers to somehow take over the world. Before his plans can play out and Yui is brainwashed, she is rescued by a mysterious man wearing a lab coat and set free. Seeking to learn more about what's happened, after hearing nothing for several days, she hears of a golf tournament sponsored by the Hazard Foundation. She voluntarily enters herself into the contest to find the truth, her friend, and the man who rescued her. On her journey, Yui will encounter many combatants, all of which refer to her as Blackfire, and like her, are battle golfers. The player must defeat each opponent in a best of 3, however a draw is also counted as a loss. Defeating each battle golfer will grant the player with new skills and experience points as well as uncovering more information and progressing the story. A defeat is an instant game over. The player is able to speak with characters before and after each match, as well as think, observe and sometimes collect or use items in a similar fashion to graphic adventure games. Many players have pointed out that each battle golfer appears to be a parody of a character from Japanese pop culture. Hagata is a reference to Hanagata from the popular baseball manga Kyojin no Hoshi. He even refers to Yui as Hoshi. Kitako appears to be a female version of Kitaro from the popular manga Gegege no Kitaru. In the manga, Kitaro has one eye covered with his hair. This is because not only is his eyeball missing, but it's actually inhabited by the ghost of his father and lives on his head. Similarly, Kitako has one eye covered, except her missing eyeball is her mother. And finally, D-Bot is a parody of the title character of the 1977 Japanese superhero series, Kaiketsu Zubat. The golfing sections play like many standard golf titles of the time. The player can select a club, where they want to hit the ball and in which direction, with a sliding power gauge that determines the driving force. There is also wind that impacts the drives with varying direction and force. The player can also check with their caddy to find out the distance to the pin and the conditions of the terrain. As previously mentioned, unlike most golf games, skills can be unlocked and used to cause different effects to the player's shot. For instance, making the ball stop dead when landing, allowing the ball to skim on the surface of the water, and even a power that lets the player control the direction of the ball in mid-air. Each of these skills costs skill points, or SP, with the player's maximum SP being increased by earning experience and leveling up. Many of the game's courses are fantastical, featuring a variety of shapes and hazards unlike standard golf, such as a baseball pitch or a match being played across a graveyard. The game makes use of passwords, allowing for a number of cheats. According to the game's fan translator, Filler, these were originally haikus, including two popular Japanese haikus by one of the most famous poets of the Edo period, Matsuo Basho. Ah, the ancient pond. As a frog takes the plunge, sound of the water. Mounds of summer grass, the place where noble soldiers one time dreamed a dream. And lastly, the original developers included their own haiku, which translates to stroke. Since there are skills, it is easy. There is also a two-player mode in which players can compete across the game's courses, utilizing the entire arsenal of skills acquired throughout the adventure. We are now about to spoil the ending of the game, so if you want to play the game for yourself, or you just don't want to know the ending for some reason, skip to the time displayed on screen. During Yui's investigation, she enters a hidden lab and encounters Dr. Tighe, the man who rescued her during the game's introduction. He reveals that he is the brother of Professor G, and though he attempted to thwart his brother's efforts at world domination, it was too late. He then puts it upon Yui to defeat Professor G and utters a cryptic message when Flame and Thunderbolt unite, before he is then killed with a golf ball. Yui must then face off against Professor G. He explains that he created the tournament to train Yui to become the ultimate battle golfer. Once defeated, he goes on to explain that this is because he wanted somebody to replace him as the head of Dark Hazard. This is due to his impending death after his cybernetic enhancement shortened his lifespan. His plan was to have Yui and Ran face off to decide his successor. Before leaving, the player searches G's body and finds a mysterious flute. As an unsurprising twist, seeing as one character just outright tells the player of the fact earlier in the game, it is revealed that Ran, now known as Shadow Thunder, has been acting as Yui's golf caddy for the entire game. Yui then must defeat Ran in a golfing match. These battles feature the starting course of each of the other opponents the player defeated, alternating with a set of new courses for the final showdown. After winning the showdown, Yui tries desperately to remind Ran of who she once was. However, it seems as though she is not easily turned. Yui then remembers the flute she acquired from Professor G. Here the player is faced with two choices, either blowing the flute or destroying it. Both decisions lead to separate endings. If the player decides to blow the flute, the voice of Professor G echoes through Yui's mind and she becomes Blackfire, taking up the mantle of the leader of Dark Hazard. The player then receives a game over. On the other hand, if the player decides to destroy the flute, the mental conditioning on Ran is broken and she is returned to her former self. Unfortunately, as Yui offers her hand to help Ran up from the ground, Flame finally meets Thunderbolt and a huge explosion is triggered, killing 20,000 people and injuring many more. The player then sees Yui and Ran travelling up a tall lift overlooking the city. The end. A large number of reasons behind the game's lack of localization can be determined. Battle Golfer Yui combined two genres which weren't popular with publishers of Genesis games in the West, golf and RPGs. The game received a generally poor reception amongst Japanese reviewers, giving Sega a good indication that the title would fare badly with an overseas audience.
However, in 2007, ROM hacking user Guest posted initial groundwork on tools to translate the title. Building upon this effort, users Supper and Filler got to work on finishing a patch to not just translate the game into English, but also fix a number of bugs present in the original. Rather than attempt to localize the game for familiarity's sake with Westerners, much of the game's references remain as they were in order to preserve the game's original script. Hello and welcome to Region Locked. Today's episode comes courtesy of our Trivia Don patron D180223, who chose the series and helped by providing us with the bulk of the research. Super Robot Wars, or SRW for short, is a series of turn-based strategy games featuring appearances from popular mecha found in various different anime shows, manga, and video games. The plot and characters from all of these mecha series are combined together to form one solid narrative, and the games are usually coupled with extensive battle animations. Normally, games within the series make use of traditional strategy RPG mechanics and deviate from this very little. The series has more than 50 games under its banner, and we won't be able to explore them all individually for that very reason. The success of the first game in the series spawned multiple sequels and spin-offs, releasing on at least 18 platforms, with each new title bringing in and debuting different robots and characters from countless anime, manga, and games. If you can think of a popular Japanese media featuring mecha, there's a good chance it shows up in one of these games. Much of the Super Robot Wars series relies primarily on its story, with gameplay sticking to a fairly formulaic standard across all of the games. The game's stories are told through text-based cutscenes and dialogue boxes, while battles take place in the form of a typical strategy RPG. The player's units are positioned on a grid, and during the player's phase, units can be moved closer to enemy units in order to initiate attacks. Each of the player's units has a wide variety of their own unique attacks, which can be executed when in range of their opponent's units. The defending unit is capable of retaliating during an attack, being given the choice of defending against an attack in order to reduce damage received, evading to increase the chance of the attack missing entirely, or countering the enemy's attack with their own. In later games of the series, units can also support one another when positioned closely, such as jumping in front of allies to take reduced damage in their place, attacking alongside allies, or even initiating powerful combination attacks to devastate enemies. Each pilot also has special commands known as Spirit Commands, which provide a variety of different effects, including healing or stat buffing. After the player has finished commanding their units, or chooses to pass their turn, the enemy will initiate their phase. Battlefields can also feature varying objects and terrain. These can affect the strategy of how units should be used, with some being stronger within one location or weaker in another, and sometimes being unable to use certain mechs in a battle at all. Each mission will have an objective or multiple objectives, which can also change as the story progresses on a battlefield. The player is able to save in the midst of battle, allowing for strategic saving. After each battle, the player is able to bolster their team by upgrading their unit and pilot stats. Both pilots and mechs are upgraded separately from one another. Using cash obtained from defeating enemies, the HP, EN, armor, mobility, and weapons of mechs can be upgraded to make them more effective on the battlefield. Pilots can have their stats strengthened or be taught new pilot skills to improve their performance and usability in battle. Mechs can also be strengthened or supported with items that can be obtained by defeating enemies in prior stages. As of course this is a broad overview of the large number of titles, some games have minor differences from one another in how these mechanics play out, but generally speaking, they all remain very close. As mentioned before, one of the main draws of the Super Robot Wars series is its stories, relying on a variety of different franchises coming together for a single narrative. To tie these together, rather than putting the player in control of an already existing franchise character, they instead take the role of an original character created by Banpresto. In some cases, the stories can involve plots from their featured series, though altered to better fit the scenario of a crossover. Series producer Terada has said that when writing a Super Robot Wars game story, the team will follow one of two methods. Either deciding on how the story will go overall before picking the series that will be involved and then fleshing out the story in more detail, or they will pick most of the series that they want to include and then write everything after the fact. The first game in the series was Super Robot Wars, released on the Game Boy in 1991. It consisted of characters from 3 different mecha franchises: Universal Century Gundam, Mazinger, and Getter Robo. Unlike most of the games that came after it, the player selects a team based on each franchise and that team's designated hero, rather than an original character created for the game. Over the many decades of creating games in the Super Robot Wars franchise, the company had designed enough of their own original characters to make spin-off games, featuring only Banpresto original characters, often referred to as Banpresto Originals by the fan community. These spin-off titles would be known as the OG, or Original Generation series of SRW games. This OG series went on to create its own slew of media based on Banpresto characters, an anime consisting of 2 series, 52 episodes in total, as well as a 3-part OVA, though the plot deviates from the original generation games. There are also manga based on the animated shows. Not only this, but the OG series also spawned an audio drama. As with a lot of games in recent years, Super Robot Wars also received a few mobile spin-off titles, such as SRW Card Chronicles in 2013, SRW Cross Omega in 2015, and SRW DD. Super Robot Wars Cross Omega in particular plays differently from traditional Super Robot Wars games. It mixes tower defense with RTS elements, similar to mobile games like Sega's Chain Chronicle. Cross Omega is notable because it features an outrageous number of franchises. More specifically, over 100 franchises, with a mix of familiar and surprising series entries. To name a few: Daitan 3, Super Sentai Zyuranger, Votoms, Medabots, Gurren Lagann, Little Witch Academia, Gunbuster, Crayon Shin-chan, Code Geass, Space Sheriff Garvin, Gundam Wing, Fooly Cooly, Mega Man, Van Dread, Sakura Wars, and even Godzilla. Due to the extensive multitude of licenses of the series, it's been difficult to localize and release these games outside of Japan. For the past 25 years, no mainline or traditional Super Robot Wars game have ever gotten a Western localized release. The only exceptions are the OG and Endless Frontier games, which feature original characters exclusively without a single licensed character or series involved, translated and published by Atlus. These games would have had less issues from a licensing standpoint, as Bandai Namco could deal with the rights for the rest of the world internally. When it comes to the world of fan translations, several games within the series have been hacked for English-speaking audiences. Aeon Genesis, a team of translators that crop up on this show time and time again, have worked on translating Super Robot Wars games since the early 2000s. Their work includes full translations of the original game released for the Game Boy, Super Robot Wars 2 on the NES, Super Robot Wars 3, EX and Gaiden for the SNES, and Super Robot Wars Alpha Gaiden for the PlayStation 1. They continue to work on translating further games even at the time of creating this video. Another team led by King Com, which is a brilliant name by the way, has translated Super Robot Wars J for the Game Boy Advance. Steel Soul and his team have translated Super Robot Wars A Portable for the PSP. OG 1 and 2 for the Game Boy Advance suffered from poor sales, often cited for containing only original characters from games never seen outside of Asian markets, and also because of their release towards the end of the Game Boy Advance's life cycle. Endless Frontier is a spin-off title for the Nintendo DS that deviates from the traditional tactical RPG elements of the mainline SRW games. It was jointly developed by Monolith Soft and Banpresto. The game has an overworld and party system similar to that of traditional RPG games. The battle system is similar to that of Namco Cross Capcom, a PS2 crossover game which Monolith Soft previously developed and was also translated into English by fans. We've actually done a video on that previously, check out the top right corner of the screen. Besides original characters made for the game, Endless Frontier also features original characters from Namco Cross Capcom and Xenosaga. In 2016, on the 25th anniversary of the Super Robot Wars franchise, Namco Bandai released Super Robot Wars OG The Moon Dwellers, the latest entry in the OG series at that time, for both PS3 and PS4, with language support for Chinese, Korean and English, but only released in Asian territories. They even included a complete summary of all previous OG games in a 4-hour featurette. However, the translation of the Moon Dwellers was seen as being of a low standard. Though English-speaking players could easily follow the story of the game, some dialogue was stilted or phrased poorly. In early 2017, and still in the spirit of the franchise's 25th anniversary, Bandai Namco revealed that much like Moon Dwellers, Super Robot Wars V, the latest mainline entry in the franchise at that time, would be released on the PS4 and Vita in Japanese, Chinese, Korean, and English for Asian regions. Super Robot Wars V is the first ever mainline SRW game to receive an official English release, as prior to V, only a few OG games received the English localization treatment. This was followed by Super Robot Wars X a year later in 2018, also on the PS4 and receiving the same language packs as its predecessor, including English. However, SRWX is unique in the sense that long-time members of the SRW community, such as Christina Rose or Dramata1, who did fan translations of earlier SRW games such as Alpha Gaiden, were recruited as freelancers to help with the translation of the game, greatly improving the English script as compared to Moon Dwellers in 2016. Super Robot Wars T, the most recent entry in the main series at the time of this video, also includes English language support, but again only in Asian territories at this time. The game also features the debut of Cowboy Bebop into the series, a show extremely popular with Western audiences. The team focused heavily on the results of a poll issued to players in both Japan and internationally, leading to the choices made for which series would be included. The developers also wanted to broaden the age range of those who would be interested in playing the title, including Captain Harlock SSX for an older audience, Magic Knight Rayearth for those slightly younger, and younger than that, Cowboy Bebop. They also included Expelled from Paradise and Mazinger Z Infinity, highly requested additions from more recent years. Christina Rose was once again recruited to be the lead English translator of the game, thus ensuring that the game had a solid English script. This shows that in recent years, Bandai Namco have made a demonstrably conscious effort to meet the demand of the overseas market and create games with English language support. Namco Cross Capcom released in 2005 exclusively in Japan, with Western fans crying out for a release at that time. This likely led the company to acknowledge the Western audiences for some of their titles, such as Project Cross Zone, or more relevant to anime and manga audiences, Jump Superstars and Jump Ultimate Stars, J-Stars Victory Versus, and most recently Jump Force. As the Shonen Jump brand has a strong following in the West with series such as Naruto, Dragon Ball, and One Piece, the company had evidence of potential sales outside of Asian territories. However, mecha anime, despite having a strong cult following, potentially doesn't have the same scope compared to mainstream anime audiences, which is most likely why the vast majority of these games have yet to see localization or release. With the company having begun to include English language support within games, though still only releasing them in the Asian market, this allows for English speakers in the region to play their titles, as well as opening a loophole for those in the West. With online distribution becoming more and more common, as well as region-free consoles, Westerners can simply sign up to a different regional online marketplace and still download the titles. This, in theory, negates the company's requirement to work with license holders to re-evaluate their contracts for new territories, though whether the company had this in mind when creating English language support remains to be seen. Regardless, it's a welcome addition for many fans around the world. That's all for today, but don't forget to check out D180223's channel for all your SRW needs. And again, thanks to him for all the research and all the footage he provided for this video. The original book is also now successfully funded, so thank you guys for that, it means so much to us. You can still check it out in the description down below.
Come on, Chad Barton, let's go check it out.
Yeah, that's right. Read my name, you dirty girl.
What are you doing?
I'm scanning the area for Patreon activity.
Have you found Eddie?
Who are you?
We've discovered a Clefairy and Corey Nelson. Hector I. Murillo is missing, though.
Oh, Nani?
I want to meet the Freemaster Gamers.
Not Vitas Varnus?
I like Trevor Wooten, he's the good one.
I'm partial to Paul White II.
The D180223 was unsuccessful, because I forgot to turn it on.
Not quite the Robert Cox I'd been hoping for.
You're just your book.
Do you even know what a Jello Star 7 is?
Yeah, you wouldn't know a skunk starlight if it hit you in the face.
I don't have time to argue with you, boy. I'll show you the true power of the Patreon Brigade.
Oh, yeah.
Your boy Beowulf besieges you. I shall guide you all to Patreonia.
Oh my god, he's so cool. I never thought I'd see Guillermo Chavez in the flesh.
Arcady Skywalker and Doji Baron Red will lead you the way to Malcavio's paradise. But we are going to leave the children behind. They smell.
Nanny.
Hello and welcome to Region Locked. Sega's history is full of games that are considered arcade classics, and some of these were made even more popular by their home console ports. 1988's Altered Beast is seen by many as one of Sega's standout titles. It follows the story of a centurion resurrected by Zeus, who is instructed to go forth and rescue Zeus's daughter Athena from the demon lord Neph. To do this, the Centurion can transform into a number of creatures like a werewolf by collecting power-ups. The game's original arcade ending reveals that the characters in the game are actually actors fulfilling the roles of a film production. For America, the arcade game and its ports would be the only Altered Beast titles released. For Europe and Japan, on the other hand, there was another Altered Beast game released on the PlayStation 2. Before we get started, I'll just give you a warning that this video contains graphic imagery that might not be suitable for those of a more sensitive disposition. Altered Beast for the PlayStation 2 was developed and published by Sega in 2005. It was released in both Japan and Europe, meaning that a full English translation is available. The game follows Luke Custer, a man who is a genome cyborg. His DNA has been artificially modified so that he can make use of microchips containing the genes of different beasts, allowing him to transform into various anthropomorphic creatures. At the start of the game, Luke crash lands on an island after the helicopter transporting him is attacked. He loses his memory and must learn the truth about himself and the experiment that was carried out on him. Over time, we learn that Luke is a special military operative who was sent to investigate a genetic outbreak in a small coastal town. Set across an open and explorable island, the player must make their way through each area while defeating enemies and obtaining additional DNA samples. Combat is primarily focused on combos and transformations, with Luke being able to switch between each transformation at any time through the use of the circle button. This allows him to become a variety of different creatures, with the werewolf being the primary focus of the game. The player has two different energy bars, one for their health and one which determines the amount of time that they can remain in their transformed state. After this second energy bar is depleted, the player's health will begin to rapidly decline in its place. To top up the bar, the player must defeat monsters and collect green or red energy that spawns on their corpses. Green is for monster energy and red is for health. This encourages the player to kill many enemies in quick succession so that they can stay transformed for longer periods of time. By killing enemies, it's possible to increase the volume of combos that can be performed with each transformation. Additional skills can also be learned at certain points, like improving the jump height of the werewolf, which helps the player navigate the map and gain entrance to previously inaccessible locations. Upon completion, additional forms can be used in the New Game Plus, giving the player a total of 9 different beasts to transform into. These include the werewolf, used for fast combos and as a general all-round fighter, the merman, who can navigate deep water and whose only attack is a homing torpedo, the wendigo, who delivers strong, slow punches and can lift heavy objects. With slow movement, his abilities are better utilized against larger creatures. The Garuda provides the ability to move around the map with its flying capabilities. This form is also able to attack from a distance. The Minotaur takes the appearance of a flaming bull, able to burn enemies with both fists and horns. The dragon, considered to be the ultimate genome transformation in the game's plot, is able to use lightning-based attacks to defeat enemies with devastating effect. The additional forms that can be unlocked after completing the game are the white were-tiger, who plays like a slightly stronger version of the werewolf, the grizzly bear, which makes use of various earth attacks to deliver massive damage, and an unidentified weightless human, or UWH, capable of controlling gravity and time, able to kill enemies instantly or deliver massive damage to bosses. The game's plot and character have very little in common with Sega's original release. The two games only share the similar theme of a character transforming into a variety of beasts. Gameplay, plot, characters, and environment have all been changed, looking to create a more modern setting from that of ancient Greece. The game received mixed reviews on release, with many claiming the title holds little value for those who weren't already fans of the original game. Poor controls and lack of cohesive plot led to a negative reception, and ultimately damaged the game further when it came to localization. In a 2004 article, it was revealed that Sega had cancelled efforts to bring the title to the US market. The lack of positive response for the game likely caused Sega to cut their losses. While this isn't completely confirmed, we also believe that the violent imagery of the transformations that play every time the player turns into a different beast form may have concerned the American marketers. However, with that said, the European release surprisingly received an age rating of only 12.
Hello, and welcome to Region Locked. Many gamers know of Enix, publisher of several popular RPGs in the mid-90s. Their growth and strong presence in the gaming world led to a merger with Squaresoft to form Square Enix. Both companies were known for RPGs, creating some of the genre's best-selling games. However, Enix's first published game was little more than a puzzle game that never reached America. That game is Door. Door sees the player controlling the character Chun, a small, ball-like white creature that wears a baseball cap. The aim of the game is to capture aliens by trapping them behind doors throughout each stage. To capture the aliens, the player must first open a door, and when the alien walks in, they must close the door behind them. Once closed, a door cannot be reopened. If the player leaves a door open for too long after an alien enters, it can escape, and will need to be recaptured. Bonus items appear when aliens are locked away, and higher scoring items spawn for capturing multiple aliens at the same time. To capture multiple aliens at once, the player must figure out each alien's mannerisms. Some aliens follow Chun in a direct path, some take a roundabout route using ladders, while others mimic the player's jumps. Chun can only walk, climb ladders, and perform a small jump. Since the player has few techniques at their disposal, avoiding aliens can be a real struggle. As the game progresses, other hazards appear, such as nails on the ground or slides the player can fall down. New ladder types are also introduced that either only aliens or Chun can use. As a result, the player can come up with creative strategies for capturing multiple aliens by dying on purpose. Closed doors will reopen when the player dies, but the aliens trapped behind them will not respawn. The player must take note of how many doors and enemies are in each level and where they are placed. For example, 2 enemies appear in level 10, but there is only one door. Both aliens are initially too far apart to be captured in quick succession without one escaping. To trap them, the player must maneuver both aliens close together. If a player only captures one alien, they are forced into a no-win scenario and must sacrifice a life in order to progress. The game's origin is perhaps the most interesting talking point. Yasuhiro Fukushima renamed his company Enix in 1982, after being inspired by the personal computer industry forming in the United States. Although he wasn't a programmer, Fukushima wanted Enix to be a company that could publish titles created by other talented individuals in the field. To find that talent, the company set up a national programming contest which garnered 300 entries. First prize went to the creator of Door, Koichi Nakamura. The year after the game's release, Nakamura founded the game development company Chunsoft, named after Chun from Door. The company merged with game developer Spike in 2012, and is now known as Spike Chunsoft. Koichi Nakamura was hired by Enix,
and all rights to Dor became Enix's property. Enix published Dor on several Japanese home computers in 1983, with sales exceeding 200,000 copies. Another noteworthy person, Yuji Horii, was hired as a result of the contest after making it to the finals with a tennis game. One of Enix's next releases, a game by Horii called the Portopia Serial Murder Incident, is credited as the reason Metal Gear creator Hideo Kojima entered the video game industry. As the console market grew bigger within the industry, a Famicom version of Dor was published in 1985. 1 year later, the company created the RPG that would make Horii and Nakamura prominent names in the industry, Dragon Quest. Horii later worked as a supervisor for the Super Nintendo RPG Chrono Trigger and even made a cameo appearance in the title. Dor falls into the category of game that was no rare sight at the time. It was a random puzzle game that wasn't anything revolutionary or groundbreaking. It was just a puzzle game. The reason America never saw it was probably because the companies involved in its creation weren't big enough to warrant funding an international venture. That said, the game is notable in Japan. Famitsu editors even put the title among the likes of Super Mario Bros. And Donkey Kong on the list of the best Famicom games ever released.
When it comes to gunplay action, many in the games industry will look to movies. Something we often see games attempting to replicate is the pure action of dual-wielding some guns. Whilst many games do have options for dual-wielding pistols, it's never truly replicated with the same sort of action capable within film and television. This is due to aim typically being dedicated to a single reticule on screen, meaning that you're effectively firing two guns into the same location, and not in different directions at different targets. One on-rails co-op shooter title that attempted to change this was Twin Caliber. Twin Caliber released exclusively in Europe in 2002 for the PlayStation 2 by Rage Software, a now bankrupt British team that hailed from the city of Liverpool. The game features two-player cooperative gameplay, although a single-player option is available, which will provide the player with an AI-controlled partner. The title plays like most arcade-era on-rails shooters, and features a total of 26 stages. It attempted to combine the world of games and movies, featuring cinematic camera positions with gameplay built entirely around the mechanic of operating two guns at the same time. With the player walking through stages autonomously, it gives the player the ability to concentrate on making use of both of the character's weapons. The game lets the player dual-wield through both analog sticks, with both sticks controlling the player's respective arms with full 360 degrees of rotation. A gun's line of sight is pointed out for the weapon to help make aiming slightly less asinine, an issue that comes from the game's camera often shifting around to suit the game's predetermined path and scenarios. Due to the need for multitasking, the game requires a lot of practice to have the player be able to concentrate and consistently hit their mark in two different locations. Although this mechanic is the unique aspect to the work, it can also be disabled to map both weapons to the right stick alone. Special weapon ammo is limited, though through the use of checkpoints can be restocked, as well as the player's health being refilled. While friendly fire is also considered to be the true way in which the game should be played, it can be disabled. Boss fights often require the player to shoot at two areas simultaneously, causing issues for players opting to have both guns tied to the same control mechanism. It also causes a requirement of learning to adapt to this new form of gameplay. The manner in which boss fights must be executed is often left fairly ambiguous, or in some cases, hidden through misleading cues. The game's plot follows John T. Fortman, a sheriff caught up in the middle of a mutant apocalypse. After a mysterious young woman turned up in the small town of Sweet Liberty, rumors began to spread of a sinister cult developing. It took a month before all hell broke loose, and people began to mutate. With his fellow officers of the law out of commission, Fortman finds a partner in an unlikely and cliché turn of events. With nobody to assist in taking out the creatures, he turns to another survivor within the prison's high security wing, Valdez, an inmate on death row. The two fight their way through the town, killing hundreds as they go. The game's lack of localization in America comes from the developer's lack of experience in publishing games, though not in the way that is usually the case with most region-locked titles. Rage Software filed for bankruptcy a year after Twin Caliber's launch within PAL territories, after the company sought to expand its reach beyond just a development studio and become a publisher too. The team had little success as it took on this new venture, with many of the titles released being slated within reviews and selling well below expectations. The largest of disappointments for the team likely came from their brand deal with the professional soccer player David Beckham. With Twin Caliber being one of their final releases before closure, it's of course not surprising to hear that efforts to take the title overseas would have been fruitless. At the time of its closure, Rage Software was considered to be one of the oldest game development studios within the UK, with offices spread across 6 cities. If the team did manage to take Twin Caliber to the United States, it would have likely been of little salvation, as the game was critically panned and also only saw a limited run within the company's home country.
Bomberman, a series that has been around since the early days of gaming. With that history is a large catalogue of games, ranging from the expected to the unexpected. From internationally recognised classics to region-locked obscurities. As with most recognised characters in the gaming world, it should come as absolutely no surprise to see Bomberman pull out the sweatbands and take on the sport genre in Bomberman Hardball. Bomberman Hardball was released in Japan as Bomberman Battles in 2004, before a PAL version was released a year later. While most Bomberman games take the form of a competitive top-down action game, Hudson decided to take the series into a different form of competition. Split up into 4 different games, the title includes 3 different sports as well as the traditional battle mode as seen in the standard Bomberman games. Another mode is also present, which provides the most interesting element to the game, called Living Mode. Living Mode shows the white bomber in his house. The house contains a small variety of things to explore. Through the use of a remote, the player can watch demos from different game modes, played by only the game's CPU players. It's also possible to select an option to customize the player's character, their name, and purchase new outfits from a gumball machine with coins earned through the other game modes. The game modes are pretty much what you would expect. Baseball has 2 modes, a single match or a pennant race, with the player entering a league match against 5 CPU players over the course of 30 games. With the bulk of the game being controlled automatically, it is even possible to set the fielding to automatic. The game is mainly built around correctly timed button presses. Golf can be played in exhibition mode or tournament modes with 18 different holes. If you've ever played a golf game before, the game's mechanics are obvious. A power bar determines the shot's strength, and then stopping the bar at its stationary marker will determine accuracy. It's a golf game, you know? The tennis mode allows for exhibition matches and tournaments across both doubles and singles on grass, hard, and clay courts. Again, this is merely a generic tennis game with terrible physics. The game's main attraction is in its battle mode, the main gameplay of most other Bomberman releases. It follows the typical Bomberman formula of a grid-based competitive action match in which players attempt to blow each other up with bombs. The modes included are the classic deathmatch battles, star battles in which the player must collect the most stars, crown battle where the players hunt down a crown on the stage to win, and points battle in which the player respawns upon death and points are awarded for each frag. Bomberman Hardball released with an English translation in PAL territories prior to the release of the Bomberman Land titles. As a result, several character names differ from other games within the series. Cheerful White is referred to as the Ivory Bomber, Cool Black is named Star Bomber, Bookworm Green is called Jade Bomber, and Kid Blue is known as Blue Bomber. Real original. Ubisoft, the game's publisher, made a press release to announce the game's launch alongside Bomberman DS. The statement from January 2005 announces the company's intentions to publish and distribute Bomberman DS for the Nintendo DS in Europe and North America, and Bomberman Hardball for Sony's PlayStation 2 throughout Europe. This reveals that at the time of the game's announcement for international release, there were no intentions of the game being taken to the United States. An anomaly with this Bomberman release is the lack of Konami distribution. Ubisoft had likely signed an agreement with Hudson to publish titles only a short period before Konami's acquisition of Hudson in April of 2005, only 3 months before Hardball's release. Bomberman's choice to release outside of Japan, only in Europe, is an oddity, with much of the game's materials and marketing focused on the baseball element of the title, a sport primarily played by American audiences.
The run-and-gun platformer has always had a fairly loyal following, particularly with titles like Metal Slug or even Gunstar Heroes. Today, we're going to take a look at a game that fits this genre, found in an unexpected place by an unexpected team. That game is Rapid Reload for the original PlayStation. Released in 1995 in Europe and in Japan as Gunner's Heaven, Rapid Reload was created by the team at Media Vision, a company primarily known for their work on the Wild Arms series of games. The player is able to choose between one of two playable characters, Axel or Ruka. Gameplay is typical of run and gun, but with the addition of being able to switch between 4 different weapons. The duo have a unique set of 4 weapons each, meaning that the game plays differently depending on character choice. Attacks can be shot in 8 directions, with some weapons providing homing attacks against enemies, relieving the stress of having to actually aim. The player can also attack with throws, and can zip around stages with the use of a grappling hook. However, Rapid Reload's unique mechanic comes in its points system, designed to bolster a player's shots. As more points are collected, a counter at the top of the screen increases, improving the power of shots. Temporary buffs can also be collected, which will push this counter to its limits, making the player capable of complete domination for an extremely brief period of time. As time goes on, the counter will decrease, encouraging the player to kill more enemies to top it up again. This mechanic, though one of the game's only unique features, is heavily criticized by players due to the lack of balance that it brings to the game. At times, the player can have a huge excess of points, while at others the counter can dwindle to 0 due to long periods of no enemies appearing. Whilst fighting against a boss, however, the counter does freeze, allowing the player to continue using their stronger attacks against their foes. The game's plot follows Axel Sonics and Ruka Hetfield as they hunt down a legendary stone known as Valkyrie. The treasure hunters aren't alone in their search, as a terrorist group called the Pumpkinheads are also keen to get a hold of this treasure, so that they may use it for world domination. Very unique plot. The team must fight their way through a barrage of Pumpkinhead soldiers across several different locations in the world, taking out the captains of the organization as they go. Axel and Ruka have their own unique endings, encouraging the player to complete the game twice in order to see the results. Being the second title that Mediavision had ever created, it may be considered unfair to make comparisons of cloning. However, I'm sure that you yourself can see the game's resemblance to Sega's Gunstar Heroes. And you wouldn't be alone in that comparison, as many reviews gave the game low scores as a result, criticizing the lack of features compared to Sega's earlier release, such as simultaneous cooperative multiplayer. While the game received a PAL release for the PlayStation's launch, the game was left out of America due to an issue that we have already spoken about in a previous episode on a game called Little Ralph. Many 2D titles were skipped over for the Western market in favor of more futuristic 3D games. The game would have been unlikely to receive critical acclaim within the region, as proven by reviews of the game's other publications. Whilst many will consider the game to be visually appealing, at the time of release many saw the game as nothing particularly interesting compared to earlier SNES or Sega Genesis titles. For a new console looking to evolve the gaming market into a 3D space, Sony likely felt that Rapid Reload was simply too archaic to be able to release it as a new game on their latest system.
It isn't rare to see the spin-off of a popular series fail to receive an international localization. The resulting games can often be something new and interesting, providing a fresh look at a series the fans already know and love. The Lost Planet series had 3 releases in the West, each being a third-person shooter in which the player must fight off aliens while inhabiting a planet known as EDN3, which is currently going through an ice age. Prior to the release of Lost Planet 3, Capcom released a Japan exclusive title for the series which deviated from the typical style of the two previous titles. This entry into Lost Planet is called EX Troopers. EX Troopers was released in 2012 for both Nintendo 3DS and PlayStation 3. It was developed and published by Capcom with the help of Hexadrive for the PlayStation 3 release. Deviating dramatically from the presentation style that fans had known from Lost Planet, Capcom describes EX Troopers as having exhilarating manga-esque action, in contrast to the action or cinematic shooting presentation from the other entries in the series. The game plays similarly to previous Lost Planet titles, with gameplay seeing the player navigate through stages of extremely icy landscapes from a third-person perspective. The player can equip 2 weapons prior to each mission, typically a lighter weapon with high ammo capacity and a stronger weapon with limited ammunition. Each weapon's ammo will regenerate after a short cooldown. The player is also capable of boosting and dodging to allow more action-based combat. By utilizing both boosts and melee attacks combined with projectile attacks, the player must complete a variety of goals for missions. These range from defending or enabling points to just simply killing all the enemies within a stage. By completing missions, the player obtains experience to level up and improve their character, as well as currency to help improve weapons and armor. These upgrades require that the player also has a number of materials as well, which are collected throughout missions or by speaking with various NPCs in the game's hub maps. Medals are also rewarded for each goal that has been achieved within a mission, with special VR missions having more goals than standard missions during the first run of the game. Medals can be spent to buy music tracks and costumes for the characters. Costumes can also be unlocked through the use of codes, allowing the player to unlock costumes with ties to various different manga and Capcom game series. The game's plot follows Bren, a candidate for the Neo-Venus Construction Incorporated Academy Educational Facility located on EDN-3. While being transported to the institution on a spacecraft, the transport fleet of new recruits is attacked by a number of unknown Vital Suit mechs. Bren is selected by educational instructor Walter Stingray in order to assist him in piloting a prototype Vital Suit loaded with a next-generation AI capable of operating with full automation. Bren, as the suit's new master, names the machine Gingira and works with Walter to bring the enemy units down. After successfully taking out the enemies, Bren and Walter have no choice but to make an emergency ejection from Gingira while entering the atmosphere of EDN-3. This is where Bren discovers the planet's harsh surroundings and encounters the alien race known as the Acrid. From a base of operations acting as a sort of school, the team take on missions and fight back against the Acrid. The reason for the game's lack of localization is of particular interest, as while Capcom had initially filed for a trademark on the name EX Troopers in 2011 for the US and European markets, when asked about the potential Western release, Senior VP of Capcom, Christian Svensson, stated on Capcom's Ask Capcom forum, "Guys, I have no news to share on that front right now. Sorry." Moments later, he also stated that EX Troopers isn't part of the LP series officially, thus the difference in name, nor are there plans to bring it westward at this time. It's possible that plans may have changed with a successful release on the Japanese market, but upon release, the 3DS version sold 17,000 copies and the PlayStation version only sold 8,700. These figures make the game the weakest debut sales for any game within the Lost Planet franchise, with the reasoning possibly being that the game was competing against the sales of Call of Duty Black Ops 2, which was released around the same time. The game has a very strong Japanese theme to it, with the game's style following a manga or anime aesthetic very closely. It's possible that Capcom believed that this change in direction for a series considered to be quite serious in the West would be unsuccessful. The game is quite dialogue heavy, with long cutscenes featuring full voice acting, meaning that the cost of localizing the game could outweigh the likelihood of strong sales. The European market is largely made up of games from developers that come from the region, developing titles that never leave their origin country. The reason for their lack of localization could be from a difference in language or a lack of appreciation for the source material outside of where it comes from. When it comes to licenses used for children's TV shows, and with kids games being a pretty small market for most consoles, there isn't much profit to be seen in international endeavors. With that said, today we'll be taking a look at a few titles within Blast Entertainment's lineup. The company originates from the United Kingdom and was only active for around 3 years. During that time, they were able to publish several adaptations of popular shows, gaining the rights to release games for a number of TV series that are popular with the UK's audience. Blast published only a small number of games before their demise, all covering a variety of different TV shows and movies, with each demonstrating a complete lack of passion for the material. While we don't like to express our opinions over the titles we cover, we are willing to state that their lineup is little more than shovelware looking to make a quick buck. In this episode, Daz and myself will be covering Little Britain the video game, Xena Warrior Princess, and Daz will be starting with Mr. Bean. Enjoy!
The Mr. Bean game was released in 2008 for the PlayStation 2, 2 years after the launch of the PlayStation 3 in the Western market. Based on the character of Rowan Atkinson, the popular British comedian and actor, the game follows the cartoon version of his most internationally known role. Clearly a game designed for children, included is a very simple overview tutorial video of the game's extremely basic controls. The player must guide Mr. Bean through a series of simple stages, collecting items and obtaining a number of jigsaw pieces from chests. They're able to jump and attack with items that are picked up throughout each stage. Each weapon only works against certain enemies, and must be selected to suit each scenario. As the game was created for kids, level design is of a fairly basic nature, and designed to be anything but challenging. However, the game is extremely difficult due to the lack of polished controls. Springs have a bizarre delay on being activated, making traversal over large gaps painstakingly annoying. The reward for completion of each stage is a small clip of the original children's animated TV show, which seems to have little reflection on the game's plot, besides that of the first shown to the player when starting the game. Also included are whack-a-mole and jigsaw puzzle minigames. Being the last game published by Blast, it was developed by Beyond Reality Games, located in our hometown of Norwich. We're sorry. The company has changed in many ways, and is now known as Eyewear Designs. They now create a number of games for mobile platforms, as well as working as a consultancy service for the IT community. I will now pass you on to Greg for some Xena action.
Xena Warrior Princess was released on the PlayStation 2 in 2006 and was developed by EM Studios. The game shouldn't be mistaken for other titles from the franchise that were released internationally several years earlier by other developers. Focusing on Xena, the game throws the players directly into the middle of the story, with no introduction to the events leading up to it. Ares, god of war, has captured Gabrielle and chained her in a cell which is slowly being filled with water. In order for Xena to rescue her companion, she must fight her way through Ares' castle before Gabrielle drowns. At any point during gameplay, the player can pause their progress in order to check on Gabrielle and see how far the water has risen as they progress through the game. The result of this aspect of the title is a hard time limit on the player to complete the game, limiting them to roughly an hour and a half of playtime before Gabrielle drowns. By collecting special items, it's possible to reverse time within the chamber and have the water level descend. The logic behind the item leaving all time outside of the chamber unaffected is never explained, but in order to collect them, the player must first traverse through various stages, defeating thugs and solving tedious puzzles. The player controls Xena, of course, and has a number of attacks at their disposal. Xena is capable of punching or drawing her sword to swing an attack. It is possible to target enemies to keep the camera drawn to them, or the player can attack from a distance by throwing Xena's signature chakran. The game's controls are anything but refined, with moves being mapped to bizarre button choices. Movement is extremely floaty, and navigating the stages can be, quite frankly, a massive struggle, with the Xena Warrior Princess brand being one that has gained a large following around the world. It's a surprise to see such a respected character be granted such a poor title.
Released in 2007 on the PlayStation 2, PSP, and Windows, Little Britain the game is based on the comedy sketch show created by David Walliams and Matt Lucas. Rather than follow any cohesive plot, the title is a series of minigames featuring characters from the show. Each minigame is supposed to take the form of a sketch within the show. As with Mr. Bean, the reward for completing each game is a small clip taken from the original material. Each character is voiced by both Lucas and Williams, the original writers and actors featured in the show, who also assisted with the game's script. Tom Baker, famous for his portrayal as the Fourth Doctor in Doctor Who, also lends his voice as the game's narrator, as he does with the series. These games are fairly simple, starting with Vicky Pollard's game, in which she must don a pink bikini and ride her roller skates to collect CDs in a park. Lou and Andy appear in a swimming pool, recreating the top-rated comedy sketch of all time from the show, as determined by a 2005 poll from Channel 4 in the UK. Andy must climb to the highest diving board to perform tricks behind Lou as he talks with a lifeguard. Marjorie's game sees her in a supermarket built like a maze, playing similar to a game of Pac-Man with a more limited view and enemies that are faster than the player. The goal is to eat as many cakes as possible. Letty must attack frogs in the form of a whack-a-mole minigame. Emily and Florence play a game of British football, or soccer for you Americans, with a really weird set of rules. Then comes a simple puzzle game clone of Puyo Puyo or Columns, which is supposed to be based on the characters of Maggie and Judy. And finally is Daffod's minigame, which has him riding his bike through a village as he collects copies of the Gay Times and must run over other homosexuals while avoiding obstacles. We noticed while playing this game how the addition of player input during the standard style of sketches from the show highlights the abhorrent nature of the situations that occur throughout the show. Many of the scenes featured have the player participate in negatively representing groups of people who are considered to be vulnerable to abuse. Having goals with positive reinforcement to negative actions highlights the issues of the game's adaptation. And while the original show uses these scenes to have people laugh at those acting out of line, the game does a poor job of discouraging this behavior. It's likely that the response from the industry is reflective of this portrayal of vulnerable people. Upon release, review scores were significantly low, with GameSpot giving the game 1.6 out of 10 based on 7 different reviews. Its game ranking score is only 16%, making it the second lowest rated game on the site after the notoriously awful Big Rigs Over the Road Racing.
The reason for Blast Entertainment's catalogue of games never seeing international releases likely comes from a number of different issues. As each game released is based on a popular title, obtaining the rights to publish titles based on those franchises internationally would have posed an issue for the relatively small company. To add to that, with each game released being almost universally panned by critics, it's unlikely that the effort would have wielded much profit. Blast Entertainment was registered as having developer Andrew Payne as its director. His work for his primary company, Mastertronic, resulted in his obtaining of an OBE. In the United Kingdom, an OBE is awarded to those who provide significant contributions to the arts and sciences, or by providing significant public service work or charitable contributions. Andy Payne obtained his OBE from his work in the games industry. While the resulting products of Blast show a lack of quality, Payne's contribution to the trade organisation UKIE and the game's charity Games Aid should not be overlooked. His contributions outside of Blast Entertainment were of value. The evidence of Mastertronic's involvement in Blast Entertainment is scarce, with the company possibly attempting to distance themselves from the purposeful budget line of games.
We previously covered a region-locked title by Media Vision called Rapid Reload. The company had a number of other games that were left outside of the US, including the company's first release. Considered to be pretty popular in its native country, the title even received a sequel. Today, we will take a look at both Crime Crackers and Crime Crackers 2. Out in the vast open nothingness of space, crime is always stirring up in the obsidian sky, almost as infinite as the universe itself. To combat such crime, an intergalactic organization known as the Galaxy Police work to put criminals in their place and protect the innocent. However, to help the police with situations that they simply can't handle, the Crime Crackers come in to save the day. Taking control of the team of crime fighters as they travel the stars in their giant pink dolphin spacecraft, the player will be introduced to some unique and interesting characters. Their captain, Amelia F. Alcanet, dreams of one day rising to the ranks of the Cosmo Guardians, another group of justice enforcers who roam the galaxy. She searches for her brother, who has gone missing. The game follows a first-person perspective, and in order to attack, the player must first enter a battle stance before shooting. The game lends itself more to the dungeon crawler RPG genre, primarily focusing on exploration. Weapons and armor can be collected throughout the adventure, as well as a variety of different items. The player takes control of 3 different characters at all times, and the character in the middle of the screen takes the lead. This means that they are the one to attack, as well as the one to receive damage. Some consider the game to be playable while not being in English, as there is no fan translation available. However, it may not be so easy for those who wish to complete the title. Whilst the game has its issues, such as repetitive dungeons and unpolished mechanics, it did help MediaVision continue to create more titles with Sony, making some games with wide success. They even went on to create a sequel, titled Crime Crackers 2. After MediaVision's attempt at an alternative RPG received a mixed response, they moved on to create Rapid Reload. With their dip into an alternative genre, they went back to their initial skills with RPGs, creating the now highly praised first title in the Wild Arms series. A year later, Crime Crackers saw a sequel, fixing many of the issues held by its predecessor and being generally a more polished game. Whilst a direct continuation, this time the player is put in control of an entirely new cast of characters. The Guppy team is led by Captain Saria Hasselberg, a 16-year-old girl who, while slightly naive, has a kind heart. Her aspirations are to be as successful in her endeavors as Amelia from the original game, whose team are now known throughout the galaxy as being top-tier bounty hunters. Saria is joined by Wendy Wilkinson, a blue-haired winged maid, as well as Shiza Kanagusk, a powerful Kenpo specialist, and Marduk Hooper, the team's engineer and navigator. With them is John Michael Hasselberg, a droid who acts as a father figure to Saria, sharing her last name. John Michael is also capable of transforming into a more robust form. The crew expands as the plot goes on, providing the player with 8 different units to take into battle, more than twice the figure in the first release. With a party of 4, the game adds a restoration mechanic that heals fighters who aren't participating in a fight whilst moving around each stage. The player is also now able to look up and down, making aiming much more refined. Several items in the game make reference to earlier MediaVision games, including Moa Golt, a weapon named after the Fire Guardian from Wild Arms, and Saria's gun, titled Rapid Reload. The first Crime Crackers was a launch title for the PlayStation, and was hoped to cause a big impact with the Japanese market. It was not just an early title for Sony's console, but also, as previously mentioned, the first game created by a new studio. Made in partnership with Sony, MediaVision didn't see international success until 2 years later with the release of Wild Arms. Having been created in just 4 months, and having a very Japanese-heavy aesthetic, it's likely Sony felt that it wasn't worth localizing Crime Crackers when it was possible that it would have few sales during the early days of the PlayStation launch. With Crime Crackers 2 being a direct continuation from the first release, publishing this sequel in a region without any following of the series could have been seen as a risky strategy. Sequels which receive international localization are sometimes rebranded to appear as though they are the first of a series, but with the sequel's plot heavily involving the exploits of the team featured in the first game, this may not have been an easy solution. Their reasoning may also have been that, if the company believed the first release wouldn't sell for a variety of reasons, what chance would a sequel have? Cheese and Crime Crackers, all we need now is wine. The homebrew community is one which garners a lot of attention, particularly with constant demonstrations of how old hardware can still be utilized to create impressive digital art. A collaboration in Japan created titles which use the Famicom, not just for gameplay, but also as a means of digital art. These games aren't officially licensed by Nintendo, as they were released well beyond the Famicom's life cycle. The collaboration's first release in 2016, which was little more than a cartridge form of their chiptune album, was 8-Bit Music Power. 8-Bit Music Power is, in effect, a chiptune album that uses the Famicom console to generate the music. While the cartridge features a number of minigames, these are not the game's main draw. The game was made in a collaboration between Columbus Circle, a hardware manufacturer in Japan, and artist Riki Iwasaki. The musical pieces featured on the cartridge were created by a number of talents in Japan, with 11 tracks in total. Artists who worked on the project include Professor Sakamoto, Yuriko Kaino, and Tappy. Visualizations are included on the cartridge, with artwork that serves as a sort of screensaver whilst the album is left to play. The game saw wide success, reaching number 3 in the Japanese Amazon sales charts for pre-ordered games. The team revisited the game in 2017 in order to release a finalized version, called 8-Bit Music Power Final. This release increased the number of tracks on the cartridge from 11 to 18, while also refining several other elements. While it's hard to some to dub these releases as video games, both Ricky and Columbus Circle created an interactive experience on the Famicom after their first album release was a success. Kira Kira Star Knight DX took the team's concept further, being both musically and visually impressive, but also featuring interactive gameplay elements. The game works like most standard Infinite runners, with the player controlling a young girl with a side-scrolling view. The goal is to collect stars which enter the screen in a variety of different patterns. The player runs continuously and is able to jump in order to collect the stars. Patterns grow more and more complex as the game goes on. To be victorious in each stage, the goal is to obtain a certain number of stars before time runs out. The game's physics work like several classic games on the system, preventing the player from changing their jumping trajectory whilst in the air. This is the extent of gameplay for the title, making it pretty unsurprising to hear that the game's main focus was not on the creation of complex gameplay, but instead a demonstration of the artist's works graphically and audibly. The reason for the lack of release in the West with these titles likely stems from their actual purpose. Being more like art pieces rather than games, the market for an artist will be with those who already appreciate their creations. Ricky, the lead behind these games, as well as one of the musical composers and artists, is a recognized artist in the region, having worked on an extensive number of projects ranging from mobile phone games, music, and adult publications. Without a guaranteed market overseas, creating cartridges for what is essentially an art project would have likely been without much payoff. Versions of the cartridges would need to be created for each region that they are released in, increasing the costs of such a niche concept. Columbus Circle, who publish the titles, create hardware which is exclusively sold in Japan. Their market is entirely within the region, and it's unlikely that they felt the niche releases would be worth their time to explore expanding their distribution to overseas.
Platformer titles released around the turn of the millennium were no rare sight, with several of the most critically acclaimed games of the genre releasing towards the late 1990s. The next generation of platforms expanded their traditional audience, encompassing darker themes. One of the lesser-known games released back in 2001 was the PAL-exclusive Evil Twin Cyprian's Chronicles. Evil Twin was developed by In Utero and published by Ubisoft on the PlayStation 2 and Windows, as well as being published by Big Ben Interactive on the Sega Dreamcast. The game plays like any standard 3D platformer, with clear inspirations from the German Expressionism movement in film. It follows the story of a young orphan boy named Cyprian, starting out on his birthday, where he is joined by his friends Dave, Joey, Vince, and Steve. Cyprian's reaction to the party is one of detachment and morosity, justified by his past. Cyprian's presence within the orphanage comes from his parents dying on his birthday, leaving him to feel alone in the world. After returning to his room in a state of depression, Cyprian is greeted by his teddy bear Lenny, who has been given life through Cyprian's imagination. Becoming increasingly aggravated by the barrage of questions he is receiving, Cyprian becomes overwrought with dark, vehement thoughts, striking back at Lenny by reminding him that he is nothing but a toy and condemning him and his world underbed to oblivion. Little does Cyprian know, by giving into his sinister thoughts, a darkness has swept over the orphanage, causing Lenny to disappear while shadows emerge and take his friends. Regaining consciousness, Cyprian finds himself alone in the world of Underbed. Here he meets Wilbur, a friend of Lenny's. Wilbur explains that the world he is inhabiting didn't always appear this way. It was a world not dissimilar to Cyprian's before a wave swept it all away and a tower appeared known as Lauren Dareth. At this time, a being known as the Master took control of the world, and the people became powerless against his armies. The Master then manipulated the people of the world by erasing traces of the past and entrusting a key known as the Great Zippet to the citizens of Demi Island. In an attempt to take back control, Lenny sought out the key, but was arrested before he was able to complete his mission. The Master then split the key into 4 pieces and spread it across the world of Underbed. And now it's up to Cyprian to free Lenny by obtaining all 4 parts of the Great Zippet. He soon discovers that the islands that survived the wave of darkness are ruled over by evil incarnations of his real-world friends from the orphanage. As previously mentioned, the game plays like most standard third-person platformer titles, with the player able to maneuver and jump around the stage. To attack enemies, the player can make use of a slingshot. It is also possible to enter a first-person view, where the player is able to make more precise shots or activate switches. The world is filled with a variety of collectible items, including basic health pickups, as well as items to fill up the player's Super Sip gauge. By filling this bar, it's possible to transform into Cyprian's imaginary superhero state, Super Sip, a character that he created whilst playing with his friends in the real world. Super Sip is capable of firing long-range fireball attacks, causing more damage than his standard slingshot. While the game's first publication was on the PlayStation 2 in 2001, it was initially intended for release 2 years prior. This initial planned release was simply entitled Evil Twin, and before that the story was conceived as an animated series. Julie Salzman, the game's marketing manager, stated, "To start with, Evil Twin was intended for television, with a series of animated films whose themes explored childhood fears in a harrowing and distorted atmosphere. Faced with the magnitude of the project and the technical skills involved, and thanks to the advice of a TV producer, we turned towards the game medium." Through a long stage of planning and creation, the game's Dreamcast publication came in 2002, and was one of the final games published on the platform. In early previews of the game found in Next Gen magazine, it was revealed that the title would boast special features in the Dreamcast release. This included downloadable costumes, as well as 4 VMU minigames. While never making it to the final release, these minigames were published online after the fact by Omar Cornett, the developer of these minigames. He stated that due to complications with development, they were likely left out of the game's retail launch. The VMU games included Paper Attack, Swampy, Fat Rain, and Glucky Labby. Paper Attack is a simple arcade-style shooter. Swampy is a puzzle game in which the player must navigate a frog on a set of lily pads, touching each lily pad once and only once. Fat Rain requires the player to throw a ball at an enemy who is constantly vomiting food which must be caught. Oh, I get it. Fat Rain. And Glucky Labby is a labyrinth navigation game using a 3D view, though it was never finished. It's possible that complications in development led to delays, causing the team to fall back on their plans to release the title outside of the PAL markets. Due to delays, the Dreamcast release was handled by Big Ben Interactive, a firm known for being one of the last to publish titles for the system in Europe after the console was discontinued. Reviews praised the game's overall art direction and the musical compositions of Bertrand Ellard, but it was slated for its poor controls. In Utero, a Canadian development studio, only ever released a few games, with Evil Twin being their last one. It's possible that the long set of delays and poor sales sent the studio into a financial state that saw them closing their doors, thus making them unable to localize the game for an American market.
The PlayStation brand has always had an element of experimentation at its foundation. With popular games that rely on a player's rhythm, the Parappa the Rapper series has been considered a highlight to the PlayStation consoles for many. The team behind the series, Nana and Shah, made frequent attempts to push gaming into new directions, as was evidenced with their original PlayStation game, Vib Ribbon. Whilst Vib Ribbon was exclusively released in Japan and Europe, it later saw a digital release in the USA. However, a Japanese exclusive sequel to Vib Ribbon, which changed its experimental direction, was Vib Ripple. Released in 2004, Vib Ripple took the concepts of including your own music in games with Vib Ribbon and changed the concept to inject photographs into games instead. The player is put in control of Vibri, a vector-based rabbit featured in the game's predecessor. Each stage is made up of a photograph in the form of a trampoline on which Vibri must bounce. Through well-timed button presses that match up with the game's music, Vibri jumps varying heights. Jumping in the correct areas of the photo will release items called PETA characters. Before the time runs out, Vibri must collect a number of these PETA characters in order to win. These characters range from dogs to trees or even ice cream cones. The location of PETA characters is hinted at by the shape, color, and size of icons displayed at the side of the screen. By using these hints, the player has to try to work out the location of items. When drawing close, the controller vibrates and a drumming sound can be heard. Vibri must also avoid enemies called boonchies. Jumping into a boonchie will reduce Vibri from a rabbit to a frog, then to a worm, and eventually killing him off entirely and resulting in a game over. By collecting PETA characters, Vibri is able to evolve beyond his rabbit state, becoming Super Vibri, a form that is capable of physically hitting boonchies, which will freeze them in place. Whilst there are more characters to collect in a stage than is required to complete a level, collecting all of the characters can easily deplete the player's limited time. At the end of each stage, Vibri will present the player with new PETA characters, which are stored in an album to take a look at any time. The game contains a total of 60 photographs provided by default. Through the use of the PlayStation 2's USB ports, it's possible for the player to add their own stages to the game via a digital camera or mobile phone, which will be scaled to just 200 by 200 pixels in resolution. Photos can also be added through the console's online service. It's possible to save these photos to a memory card with 12 photos taking up roughly a single megabyte. The game's lack of localization likely comes from the game's experimental nature. Having created a number of titles which experimented with a variety of concepts for Sony in the past, it's possible that Sony didn't see wide commercial potential with the game.